Now it's time to take this 9-patch and make it into something else, a disappearing 9-patch. This is 14 inches square. So what I'm going to do is cut it straight down the middle, horizontally and vertically. I measure that center square just to make sure that it is the measurement that I want it to be. So it's real important to make sure that that's straight. Then once I've checked and double checked, and it's always important for me to double check. Actually, it's more important for me to triple check because, yeah, I like to make mistakes. But that's okay. That's why we're supposed to measure twice and cut once. I use my ruler. I've determined that each block finished was about 4.5 inches. So that means that I need to cut at the 2.25 inch mark. So lining up everything perfectly with my ruler, I measured 2.25 inches. And then using my rotary cutter, I can just cut straight up the center of that block. Once everything is cut, I leave it together, don't shift the block. And then I go in the other direction, again measuring 2.25 inches. And it's going to change depending on how big your blocks were when you put this together. But mine were 5 inches to start. And so therefore they were 4.5 by the time I lost everything in the seams. And I was able to cut them 2.25 inches. And here are the 4 blocks now that they've been cut. Now I can mix this up any way that I want. And I'll just show you just a couple things, but I always end up going back to my tried and true, which is this format. I love the way that this turned out. And now it's time to put the entire thing together. So I always like to check my measurements just to make sure. You can square the blocks up a little bit if you need to. But for the most part, I did a pretty good job on this, if I must say so myself. So now that everything is together, everything lines up nice and neatly, I flip one over onto the other one, right sides together, and then I can take it to my machine and do a 1/4 inch stitch. Once the 1/4 inch stitch is done, I can then put those two pieces together. I'm going to nest that middle seam, and that means that one of the seams will go in one direction, the other seam will go in the other direction, and then I can take it back to my machine. Now you could use a pin, you could use a clip. I'm pretty good with getting that nested the way that I need to, so I fudge it with my fingers a little bit, and then once I get it under that presser foot, I am good to go. 1/4 inch seam again, right down that center, and here we go, the finished block. It came out beautifully. Everything is nice and neatly lined up, and it is ready for the next part that I need to do. So I do need to press it because, yeah, I didn't press it before. All my seams are going in one direction. So when I press, I'm pressing them in that direction, being careful not to distort the block. Then this one is going in the opposite direction of that bottom seam. And then what I'm going to do with the new seam that I just stitched, I want them all to go in different directions. So the first two are going from right to left and left to right. So I'm going to push this seam up. And then right in the center, I can kind of break that little corner, if you will, apart. And it will allow that seam to lay top to bottom on the other side. And so it spins. and you can see it right there, how it spins and separates. But that just kind of reduces the bulk in the center, so it's not too bulky if I decide to quilt this. Once everything is pressed, it's nice and neat. I love how those corners are lining up. I give it a nice spray with my best press. That makes it nice and stiff. And, I can just really get that block to be as flat as I possibly can. I try not to do a lot of pulling because, again, you can distort the block by doing some pulling because of the bias in the fabric. So just be careful with how you are manipulating the fabric so you're not pulling it out of shape and distorting the block. It's just not something that you really want to do. So after I give this a really good press, I am now ready to go to make the additional blocks or to do the next thing that I will with this block. So I'm still deciding what the final project will be, but stay tuned because I will be doing something with all these blocks that I create with this scrap fabric. But here is the Disappearing 9-patch.